While looking for an empty seat, the queen took my arm and said, "Sit right next to me." Elias Ward had never imagined that a simple trip to the convocation hall would change his life. He had flown across star systems, left behind his small home planet of Terra, and carried with him only a thin satchel, a notebook, and a restless curiosity. Humanity had been invited to the Great Galactic Convocation, a meeting of all major intelligent species. To Elias, it was both terrifying and exhilarating. Humans were not known for long lifespans, advanced technology, or psychic powers. In fact, most species in the convocation considered humans fragile, unpredictable, and insignificant. But here he was, standing in the largest hall in the galaxy, filled with creatures of shapes, colors, and forms he had never imagined. Elias adjusted his tie, though it felt pointless. The uniforms and robes of other species were elaborate, shimmering, or pulsating with energy. And then there was him, a human, plain and ordinary in his simple gray suit. He began walking down the rows of seats, scanning for an empty one. But it seemed the convocation had been perfectly planned so that every seat was either reserved or claimed. A council of floating beings with 6 wings, a group of insect-like diplomats whose eyes reflected the entire hall, and a tall, translucent humanoid who seemed to shimmer in and out of existence all stared silently. "Excuse me, pardon me," Elias murmured, slipping between delegates. He felt a nervous sweat on his forehead. In his home office, he had read about the convocation endlessly. He had watched hollow recordings of past meetings. But none of that prepared him for the weight of this moment, the feeling that every eye in the galaxy was on him, even if no one admitted it. He was about to give up when a soft voice said, "You may sit there." Elias turned sharply. Standing beside a golden throne that seemed alive with faint, shimmering lights was the Queen of Velaris. She was the most renowned leader in the galaxy, wise, ancient, and calm, with eyes that seemed to see everything at once. Her robe flowed like liquid sunlight, and her presence made the room feel warmer, quieter, and somehow safer. I beg your pardon," Elias said, unsure if he had heard correctly. She smiled, not a polite smile, but a curious, thoughtful one. And then, without waiting for his answer, she reached out her hand. "Come, sit right next to me." Before he could process, Elias felt her hand lightly touch his arm. It was a gentle, almost electric sensation. And just like that, he was walking toward the throne, the center of the hall, and the eyes of hundreds of species following him. Elias' heart pounded. Why me? Why now? He glanced at the empty seat next to the queen. It was not a place for a human. No human had ever sat there before. He hesitated, but the queen's hand remained on his arm, steady, almost commanding. He sat. The hall went silent, a silence so heavy it pressed against his chest. The delegates stared. Whispers rippled through the rows in languages Elias could not understand but could feel in the air: curiosity, shock, and something else. Something he couldn't name. The queen leaned slightly toward him. Her voice, soft but clear, reached only him. "Observe carefully, human. Your species has forgotten what it is." Elias swallowed hard. What does that mean? But before he could answer, a herald stepped forward. "Esteemed delegates of the Galactic Convocation," the herald announced. "We are honored to witness a historic moment. For the first time, a representative of humanity will sit among us during the opening session of the convocation. Let all observe and learn." Elias felt heat rise to his cheeks. Humanity was known as unpredictable, reckless, and often laughed at by more established species. And now here he was, sitting next to the most powerful monarch in the galaxy, being called a representative. The queen waved a hand, and holographic screens appeared above the hall, showing the history of the galaxy, its alliances, and its crises. Delegates began discussing, debating, and recording everything. Yet Elias noticed she was not looking at the screens. She was watching him. "Tell me, human," she said quietly, "what do you see?" I see," Elias hesitated. What did he see? Chaos and order mixed together, species building alliances and collapsing under ambition, planets teeming with life and war both. How could he say it all? "You see what you always see," the queen said gently. "Humans see beginnings and endings. You see survival. You remember when others forget." Elias blinked. He felt his pulse quicken. Is she praising us or testing me? The session continued. Elias listened as species discussed treaties, resource allocations, and laws of interstellar travel. He tried to pay attention, but his mind kept returning to the queen. She had not invited him here to sit, he realized. She had invited him to observe, to think, to remember. By the time a pause came for refreshments, Elias was exhausted. He wandered to the hall's edge, and the queen followed, not in a threatening way, but with that calm, measured presence that seemed to quiet the chaos around her. "You look tired," she said, her voice like warm water over stones. "Tell me, human, what do you find most remarkable here?" Elias thought of his planet, of his people who had survived plagues, wars, famines, and yet built, rebuilt, and thrived. "We continue," he said. "We continue even when everything fails." The queen smiled, a secretive, knowing smile. "Yes, that is why you are here." Elias looked at her, trying to understand. The other delegates had been arguing over points of law, alliances, and threats. Humans were not supposed to matter here, and yet she had chosen him. "Chosen a human? Why me?" he asked, almost in a whisper. "Because the galaxy has forgotten how to endure," she said. "And you humans still remember." A sudden commotion drew their attention. Delegates were pointing at a screen above the hall. A massive star cluster was showing signs of collapse, a natural phenomenon that would affect trade routes, communications, and travel. Advanced species debated whether to intervene. Some said it was impossible. Others argued about who should take charge. Elias leaned toward the queen. "Is this a test?" he asked. The queen's eyes sparkled. "It is an opportunity. Watch, human, observe how others panic, notice what they fear most, and remember, when certainty fails, humans will know what to do." The rest of the afternoon passed in a blur. Delegates presented theories, simulations, and warnings. Elias, beside the queen, listened quietly, taking notes not on the science, but on the behavior of the species. Fear, pride, hesitation, stubbornness. Humanity had struggled with all of those traits too, but humans had always survived. Somehow, always. When the session ended, Elias thought he could finally relax, but as he stood to leave, the queen's hand rested lightly on his arm again. "Do not leave yet," she said. "Your place is not at the edges, your place is here at the center." Elias glanced around, unsure if she meant the throne, the hall, or the galaxy itself. "Tomorrow," she said softly, "you will speak. Not as a diplomat, not as an ambassador, but as a human. You will remind them that life continues even in the most impossible circumstances." Elias' mind raced. "Speak. To the convocation, alone, and why him?" The queen rose, her presence radiating calm authority. "Rest tonight, human. Tomorrow the galaxy will see what you already know. Survival is not about power. It is about will, persistence, and the refusal to be forgotten." As Elias left the hall, he felt an unfamiliar mix of fear and excitement. The galaxy had never treated humans as more than minor players. And now, here he was, chosen by the queen herself. He paused outside the hall, looking up at the stars through the vast windows. Somewhere out there, systems were failing, alliances shifting, and civilizations trembling. And yet, he felt a strange confidence. Humanity had survived worse, and maybe, just maybe, they could help the galaxy survive too. Tomorrow, he realized everything would change. And for the first time in his life, Elias felt that being human wasn't a weakness. It was a gift. The stars outside shimmered as if in agreement. And the queen, she watched from her throne, knowing she had chosen correctly. The first move had been made. The game was only beginning. Elias woke to the soft hum of the Valerian palace. The light outside his window wasn't like sunlight. It had no harsh glare, no shadows. Instead, it shimmered gently, as if the entire sky were made of liquid gold. The palace itself was alive, or so it seemed. Walls pulsed faintly with color, corridors rearranged themselves subtly, and distant gardens floated midair, defying gravity. Elias rubbed his eyes. He had never seen anything like this. Breakfast was delivered by a small, hovering servant, shaped like a golden teardrop, with eyes that blinked in a curious pattern. Elias ate mechanically, unsure whether to marvel at the meal or the fact that he was eating breakfast next to the Queen of Velaris herself. At last she appeared. Her robe flowed behind her like sunlight across water. She did not speak at first. Instead, she gestured for Elias to follow her into a wide hall lined with crystal panels showing stars, galaxies, and countless systems. "Today you will observe," she said softly, her eyes studying him. "Observation is more than watching. Humans excel at it, though most of your species forget the skill. Watch carefully, learn, and when the moment comes, you will act." Elias swallowed. "Act? I don't understand, Your Majesty," she smiled. "You will, but first learn, observe the convocation from this vantage point." She led him to a raised platform at the center of the hall. From there, he could see the entirety of the assembly. Delegates from hundreds of species milled, discussing, arguing, moving, gesturing. Some seemed to float, others glimmered like liquid, some emitted soft musical tones instead of words. It was a chaos of form and function. Elias took notes. He noted the way the insect-like delegates communicated through subtle wing movements, how the crystalline beings refracted light to show agreement or disagreement, and how the giant aquatic creatures seemed to sway as if in rhythm to a song only they could hear. But the queen was watching him more than the convocation. "Notice them," she said. "Notice what they fear. Fear is not always loud. Sometimes it is quiet, small, hiding in gestures and glances. Humans see fear differently. Use that." Elias tried. He saw a shimmering, metallic creature hesitate before approaching a panel. He saw a young delegate from a distant system tremble slightly as she adjusted her energy cloak. And then he saw the elder council of a famous star system whisper to one another, fear hidden behind their calm expressions. "Do you see it?" the queen asked. "They fear loss, they fear instability, they fear change, but you do not. Humans fear, yes, but you endure. You learn, you continue." Elias nodded slowly, feeling a mix of pride and confusion. Why him? Why humanity? But he didn't speak. He was too aware of her gaze. The first session of the day began. A massive star cluster, vital to trade and communication across the galaxy, was at risk of collapse. Advanced species argued over simulations, calculations, and theories. "We can stabilize it," one delegate said, "if we combine all our energy and expertise." Another argued that intervention was too risky. Some said it was impossible. Elias listened. He didn't understand the science fully. He wasn't trained in star mechanics, but he understood the behavior. He noted the pride, the hesitation, the fear, and the unwillingness to take a risk without certainty. And then he remembered the Queen's words, "Observe." Humans know how to continue when systems fail. When the delegates began bickering over whose methods should be used, Elias raised his hand awkwardly. Heads turned. "A human, speaking, here." "Yes, human," the Queen said. She did not seem surprised, only patient. Elias cleared his throat. Perhaps you are all thinking too much about perfect solutions. Maybe what you need is a plan that continues even if things fail. Not a perfect fix, but a way to survive." Whispers rippled through the hall. Delegates leaned toward each other, some curious, some offended. One elder councilman, a floating creature with crystalline wings, said, "Survival? This is about preservation. Humans do not understand scale." "I understand survival," Elias said firmly. "Humans survive when everything else fails. Maybe the cluster can't be saved entirely, but maybe life can continue even if it collapses partially. You can't prevent everything, but you can adapt to what happens." The Queen's eyes gleamed. "He understands," she said quietly. And then louder, "The human speaks wisely. Consider what he says, delegates. What matters is not perfection, it is persistence." The convocation fell silent. No species had ever dared speak like this openly to the assembly, and yet the logic was undeniable. The galaxy had depended too much on certainty. Humans survived without it. Elias felt a surge of pride, but also doubt. Could they really trust a human solution? The delegates began murmuring, analyzing, debating. Slowly, they began to see a new perspective. Instead of arguing over what must happen, they began exploring how they could continue no matter what. After hours of discussion, the Queen led Elias to a quiet observation deck. Outside, stars stretched infinitely. Entire systems spun in harmony. Yet he could feel the tension like a thin membrane over the galaxy ready to snap. "Do you see it, human?" she asked. "Your species thrives in chaos. Where others see failure, you see opportunity. Where they see endings, you see beginnings." I think I understand," Elias said. "Humans have always survived because we can adapt. We make do. We continue no matter what," she nodded. "And that is why you are here, not as a diplomat, not as an ambassador, but as a reminder. The galaxy has forgotten how to endure, you remember." Elias felt a strange warmth, a feeling he had never felt before. It was a mixture of pride, fear, and responsibility. Humans had always been underestimated, but here today they mattered. The Queen gestured toward the stars. "Tomorrow you will speak to the assembly. You will guide them not with authority, but with understanding. You will teach them something they have long forgotten, that life continues, even when systems collapse." Elias tried to imagine it, speaking to hundreds of alien species, all looking at him, all judging him. His throat tightened, and yet he felt something else, confidence. Humanity had survived worse, and now maybe they could help the galaxy survive too. That night, Elias couldn't sleep. He stared at the stars outside his window, tracing constellations he had known as a child. In his mind, he replayed the day, the convocation, the cluster, the delegates, and the Queen's words, and he understood something crucial. Survival wasn't about strength, it wasn't about technology, it wasn't about lifespan or psychic ability. It was about will. Humans had will in abundance, and the galaxy needed it now more than ever. He drifted to sleep with the hum of the palace around him, a soft vibration like the heartbeat of the universe itself. Tomorrow he would rise. Tomorrow he would speak. And tomorrow humanity would show why it survived, not through conquest but through persistence. The stars outside seemed to shimmer as if in agreement. Elias had been chosen not because of his species' power but because of its spirit. And the galaxy was about to learn something it had long forgotten, to endure even when all else seemed lost. The hall was silent. Elias felt the weight of every eye in the galaxy upon him, hundreds of species, thousands of perspectives. And all of them, every single one, underestimated humans. Until now. He had spent the night preparing, not with formulas or star charts because he could not compete with the mathematicians, engineers, and energy manipulators of the galaxy. Instead, he had focused on stories. Stories of survival, stories of humans who had faced extinction, disaster, and failure and had endured. The Queen of Velaris sat beside him, her gaze steady, calm, and unblinking. "Remember, human," she whispered. "Speak not to impress, speak to remind." Humanity survives not because it is the strongest. It survives because it refuses to stop. Elias swallowed hard, adjusted his suit, and stepped onto the dais. The hall seemed to stretch infinitely before him. Some species floated in place, their eyes glowing. Others glimmered like molten crystal. Insectoid delegates' wings vibrated nervously, and the tallest, translucent beings shimmered faintly. He cleared his throat. "My name is Elias Ward," he began. His voice was shaky at first, but he forced it steady. "I am a human. And I am here to remind this assembly that life continues." There were murmurs. Some delegates tilted their heads in curiosity. Others whispered among themselves, clearly thinking, "Why is a human speaking here?" Elias took a deep breath. "Your civilizations are incredible. You are long-lived, powerful, and wise, and yet you fear failure. You fear the collapse of the systems that you have built. You have perfected the galaxy, but you have forgotten what to do when perfection fails." A tall, crystalline delegate tilted its head. Its voice rang like wind chimes. "What do you mean, human? Our systems are precise, our calculations flawless. Failure is impossible." Elias shook his head gently. "Impossible? Nothing is impossible. Stars collapse, alliances break, civilizations rise and fall. You cannot predict every event and you cannot prevent every disaster. That is not weakness, that is life." He paused, scanning the room. He saw pride, fear, skepticism. And somewhere in the crowd he saw hope, the faintest flicker in an otherwise cautious galaxy. "Humans have always faced failure," he continued. "We have lost cities, homes, entire worlds. We have been threatened, outnumbered, and outpowered. And yet we endure. Why? Not because we are stronger, faster, or smarter than others, but because we persist. We adapt. We continue no matter the odds." Whispers spread across the hall. One elder council muttered to another, its crystal wings clicking nervously. A few species exchanged glances, clearly shocked by a perspective they had never considered. "The star cluster at risk," Elias said, "cannot be saved perfectly. Perhaps it cannot be saved at all. And yet life there can continue if we plan not for perfection but for resilience, not for control but for adaptation." Some species murmured angrily. A floating diplomat's tone rose sharply. "Are you suggesting we let it fail?" Elias met its glowing eyes evenly. "I am suggesting we prepare for failure. We plan so life survives even if systems collapse. Humans call it contingency. Others may call it improvisation. But the principle is simple. Do not rely on perfection. Rely on persistence." The hall fell silent again. A few delegates leaned forward, considering. The elders of the insectoid species whispered among themselves, wings vibrating in thought. The Queen of Velaris nodded subtly. "Observe their reactions, human," she said quietly. "Notice who understands and notice who fears. Both are important." Elias took another deep breath. "We do not need perfect solutions. We need solutions that survive uncertainty. Humans have been refining this skill for millennia, and now the galaxy must learn it too." There was a long pause. Then slowly a small group of delegates began nodding. Others tilted their heads in curiosity. Still, some glared, but Elias did not waver. He had come to speak not to please everyone, but to show the power of a human perspective. He told stories next. Stories of humans crossing oceans in wooden ships, surviving famine, building civilizations from ashes, and thriving even when empires fell. Every story emphasized persistence over power, survival over perfection, and the delegates listened. Slowly, the initial skepticism faded. They had been focused on calculations, energy outputs, and control. Now they saw a human principle in action, survival through adaptability, endurance, and collaboration. One elder council of the crystalline species finally spoke. Its voice echoed softly. Perhaps there is merit. Perhaps we have underestimated humans. Elias smiled faintly, not arrogantly. It is not about underestimating, it is about remembering. Life does not depend on perfection, it depends on persistence. The galaxy will face failures, systems will collapse, but if we plan for life to continue, then we endure. That is what humans do, that is what we must all do. Across the hall, some delegates began discussing strategies differently. Instead of arguing over control, they talked about adaptation, contingency, resilience. Elias could see the shift in thinking, slowly spreading like sunlight through clouds. The queen leaned closer. "You have done well, human," she said softly. "You have reminded them why life persists." Elias felt a warmth in his chest, a mix of pride and relief. But the work was far from over. The star cluster crisis was just the beginning. The galaxy had long depended on systems that could fail at any time. Humans survived such failures every day. After the session, the queen led Elias to a quiet chamber overlooking the cityscape of Velaris. Towers of crystal, floating gardens, and bridges of light stretched as far as the eye could see. "You see, human," she said, "perspective is power. You do not wield weapons. You do not command armies, but you remind the galaxy of something it forgot. You are humanity's greatest gift: adaptability, endurance, continuation." Elias nodded slowly. I only spoke what we know. We've survived because we have to. There is no other choice." "And that is exactly why you were chosen," the queen said. "Other species fear failure. Humans embrace it. You will now lead a group to implement your ideas, not through command, but through guidance. You will show them how to plan for collapse and ensure life survives." That is the role of humans in the galaxy. Elias' heart raced. Lead, guide. Humans were not naturally leaders among the stars. They were adaptable, yes, but delegation across alien species, coordination of civilizations, it was daunting, and yet he felt a spark of determination. He thought of his home planet, the cities that had risen from ruins, the people who had survived famine, war, and disease. Humans were not invincible, but they endured, and perhaps that was enough. The queen placed a hand on his shoulder. "Rest tonight, human. Tomorrow you begin the real work. Words are only the start. Now you will act. The galaxy needs it." Elias spent the night preparing again, not charts, not simulations, but methods of collaboration. How to communicate across species, how to observe without imposing, how to guide without commanding. He realized that humans had developed these skills naturally. Survival depended not on domination, but on connection, adaptation, and persistence. The next morning he met his team. Delegates from various species, skeptical, curious, wary, had been assigned to him. They looked at him with polite doubt. Humans, after all, were inexperienced. They lacked lifespan, technology, and psychic abilities. How could a human guide the galaxy? Elias cleared his throat. "We will start by observing the systems at risk. Then we will create plans that continue no matter what happens. Life first, control second." The group exchanged confused glances. Then the queen's voice echoed in the chamber. "Observe, learn, endure, that is your guide." And with that, Elias took his first step into a galaxy that had long forgotten the value of persistence. A galaxy that would soon learn, thanks to humanity, that survival was not about perfection, but about will, adaptability, and courage. Elias did not know exactly how it would unfold. The star cluster could fail, alliances could collapse, civilizations could fall. But he knew one thing: humans survived. And now, perhaps the entire galaxy would learn to survive too. The next morning, the convocation hall buzzed with nervous energy. Delegates from hundreds of star systems had gathered to discuss the threatened star cluster. And at the center of it all, standing before a group of skeptical, curious, and cautious representatives, was Elias Ward, a human. He felt the weight of the galaxy on his shoulders. The Queen of Velaris had chosen him not as a diplomat, not as a commander, but as a guide. And now he had to lead a team tasked with something no species had ever done before, creating a survival plan that worked even if the cluster failed. The team assembled around him was a strange mix. Lycara, a crystalline elder who refracted light to show her emotions, usually impatience. Joran, a floating, six-winged strategist from a militaristic species that prized absolute control. Telly, an aquatic being who communicated through song-like tones, often drowned out in the noise of debate. Mina, a young insectoid diplomat who looked nervous but sharp-eyed. All of them stared at him. Humans had no advanced energy manipulation, no psychic abilities, no centuries of experience in interstellar engineering. Yet here he was, trusted by the Queen of Velaris to lead them. Elias cleared his throat. We start by observing, not commanding, not calculating, observing. We need to understand what is truly at risk and how life can continue if the system fails. Lycara's crystal wings clicked impatiently. Observation is not enough. Action is needed. We cannot waste time. Exactly, Elias said calmly. But action without understanding is disaster. We cannot impose control on something we do not fully understand. Let's see what is actually happening first. He directed the team to the holographic projections of the star cluster. Systems blinked red or orange, showing instability. Trade routes were disrupted. Communications flickered. Life was at risk. Elias began asking simple questions, questions no one else had considered. Which systems can still communicate with each other if the cluster collapses? Which planets have resources to survive independently? Which species are most adaptable in extreme conditions? Delegates murmured. Some species tried to answer in technical terms. Elias listened, then reframed each response in human terms: survival, adaptation, persistence. What do humans do in disasters? He asked. When cities flood, when food runs out, when governments fail? The team paused. They had never heard a human approach disaster like this. We organize, Elias said. We share, we improvise, we continue. At first, they laughed softly, skeptical. How could humans, a species without psychic vision or energy control, teach survival to advanced civilizations? But Elias continued. He shared stories, colonies that had survived plague, entire cities rebuilt after earthquakes, civilizations adapting when planets were destroyed. Lycara tilted her head. You speak with conviction, human. Perhaps your species sees what we do not. Elias nodded. Yes. We see continuation, not perfection. The star cluster may fail, but life can continue. Systems can survive collapse if we plan for it. He proposed a simple method. Divide responsibilities among planets, systems, and species, focusing not on controlling the cluster, but on ensuring that life would persist even if systems failed. Each species contributed its unique skills: Joran's strategy, Telly's communication abilities, Mina's logistical precision, and Lycara's crystalline calculations. Elias coordinated. It was chaotic at first. No one was used to taking guidance from a human. Some delegates questioned him openly. You lack experience, one shouted. You cannot lead a multi-species project. Elias smiled. Experience is not always measured in years or abilities. Sometimes it is measured in survival, and humans survive. Slowly, the team began to follow his lead. They ran simulations not for perfection, but for resilience. They created redundant systems, backup communications, contingency plans for planets that might lose energy, food, or trade access. Hours passed. By the end of the day, something remarkable had happened. The team was no longer a collection of species. They were a functioning unit, coordinating, collaborating, and planning, and they were listening to a human. Elias realized why the Queen had chosen him. Humans had no expectation of control. They thrived under uncertainty. Where others saw failure as catastrophic, humans saw opportunity for adaptation. The Queen appeared at the end of the session, standing beside him. You see, human, she said quietly, your species teaches the galaxy how to endure, not by domination, but by guiding, adapting, and surviving. Elias nodded, exhausted but determined. It is only the beginning, he said. The star cluster is not safe yet. But now we know what to do. Lycara refracted light softly, a sign of respect. Your approach, it works, human. Perhaps humans are not as insignificant as we believed. Joran, usually impatient and commanding, hovered silently, wings still. He nodded slowly. Persistence, I understand now. Telly sang softly, harmonizing with the projections, signaling approval. Mina clicked her wings in recognition. Elias felt a spark of hope. Humans had survived chaos for centuries, and now the galaxy was learning to survive chaos too. The Queen's voice echoed in his mind. Observe, learn, endure, that is your guide. Tomorrow, they would implement the first phase of their plan, testing survival strategies in controlled simulations across multiple systems. And the galaxy, for the first time, would begin to see what humans had always known. Survival did not depend on perfection. It depended on will, adaptability, and the refusal to give up. Elias looked out at the stars from the observation deck. The cluster pulsed in unstable energy, but he felt no fear. He had humans guiding him, and he was guiding humans guiding the galaxy. For the first time, he believed that survival, true, enduring survival, was possible. And he knew the galaxy would never underestimate humans again.